Welcome back to bettersociety.info. This is our 26th video and is a continuation of the topic discussed in the 25th video. And we're talking about how to keep people down. If you're going to have a class-based society where a small number of really rich people get all the wealth and a large number of people do most of the work, how do you make it be that way? And of course, during the Civil War, there was an effort in the United States to make us have a classless society and incorporate into the freedoms of America former slaves or black people who were not slaves. Because, before the Civil War, even though a black person might be free, not in a state of slavery, the laws that applied to the white people didn't apply to them. So, how do you return to that situation after you fight a war, win it on the battlefield, enact the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, and then, what happens when you backslide, when the nation went back to the old ways of doing things where there would be an oligarchy. And one of the things that happened is highlighted in a new book. If it's not on our Amazon page on our website, I'll put it there right away. And the book is called Slavery by Another Name. And so what happened is that the 13th Amendment said that there could not be any involuntary servitude except in the case of somebody who was convicted of a crime. So in the South, that was the law, and it was in the Constitution. And so the laws that were passed, after the North gave up on, trying to have everybody be in a first-class citizenship basis, the Southern states enacted laws that, maybe a former slave who was free for a little while and was a first-class citizen for a little while and actually got to vote, and some of them served in their state legislatures, and some of them served in the United States Congress and the Senate. And then, when the North gave up and let the South go back to its old ways of having an oligarchy, then the Southern governments passed laws that made it possible for them to arrest black people. And once a person was arrested for maybe just vagrancy, or not having a job, or whatever, but once a person was arrested and then convicted of these laws, they were called Jim Crow laws, then they could be hired out to someone. And surprisingly enough, a lot of these black people who were hired out after being convicted of some Jim Crow law were hired out to their former slave owners. What a surprise. And so they ended up having to go back and work in much the same way as they had on the basis of slavery. And it was involuntary servitude, but it was done through this sham legal process. So that's one of the ways that happened. Another factors was that the Southern oligarchy kept as many people as possible poor. Poor people don't have the money to do anything but just subsist. They're only concerned about the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That we need to survive, and we need some kind of safety. But most of it was survival. Just keep everybody as poor as possible, and then they don't have any other concerns but just having enough food and water to live. And so they're certainly not going to be concerned about their freedom's higher level issues. And they also would keep people uneducated. They particularly didn't want white children and black children in the same schools, because they would spend a whole lot more money on the white kids than they're going to spend on the black kids, because basically they want them to be as uneducated as possible. And before the Civil War, it was a crime in a lot of states to teach a black person to read or do math, because they want to keep them ignorant, they want to keep them uninformed, uneducated. And a poor, uneducated person, it's easier to keep them suppressed. It's easier to keep them in their place. And if you keep them poor enough, then all they're going to be concerned about is that first level of hierarchy of Maslow's needs, which is just basic survival. So those were factors involved. Now another way that was done, it's a highly controversial issue in our society today, but what happened was at the end of the Civil War, about 10% of the Union Army was former slaves, black people. And so the federal government sent all those people home with their military rifles and their guns. And the thinking was that they're going to need those in order to keep the freedoms that we supposedly have won for them. So a major policy of the Ku Klux Klan and the Southern oligarchy, which is essentially was the same thing, was to keep the people disarmed. I mean, if you've got a county in Mississippi or Alabama and a very large percentage of the population are these poor black people, and you've only got a relatively few white people, how are the white people going to keep those people down? And of course, the Klan policy was that we're going to go around and we're going to search everybody's house and be sure they don't have any guns. And the federal government people who fought the Civil War and thought they won the Civil War were really incensed about that. But that in fact is exactly what happened. And this policy of keeping black people disarmed in the South continued up until the end of my lifetime. Some of the murders that took place in some of the southern states that were big deals, like Mississippi burning and some of those events were carried out on the basis of the thought that Northerners were bringing guns into the South to make it possible for the black people to stand up against the Southern oligarchy. And this same policy is still the policy in many nations today. There was an ABC News special, just a regular news program, and they were interviewing a Burmese monk in Burma. They've got a new name, and I can't remember what it is. Miramar, I think. But the reporter asked, well, what could they do about that? And the monk said, well, there's not anything we can do about it. He said, the military and the rulers have all the guns, and we don't have any. They don't allow us to have guns. And so these policies of gun control, as it specifically relates to keeping people in their place, is a long-term strategy of those who want to keep people impoverished and illiterate, and keep them working for the upper class people, so the upper class people really don't have to work. So that's a very controversial issue, and in fact I think I'm certain we're going to talk about that some more some other time. But it's a very polarizing issue, and we want to talk about some other issues also. So I'm going to stop and talk with you later.